Hey everybody, and welcome back to another fun and exciting pre-algebra class. Today we'll be finishing up chapter number 11. We'll be in lesson number 6. That's going to be on page 534, page 534 in your books, please. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about trigonometry. Maybe something, again, that you haven't had much experience with. Maybe you have done a little bit with it. And so let's go ahead and jump into it. If you will, go ahead and look down here at the screen. And I've got a little bit of a definition here for trigonometry. It says here that trigonometry is a branch of mathematics that deals with the measurement of triangles. Now, specifically right triangles is pretty much what we deal with all the time in trig, but you can deal with other types of triangles as well. But for the most part, probably 95% of the class is all geared toward right triangles. So we're going to learn a whole lot about right triangles. In fact, you can take a whole class about right triangles. This lesson is kind of an introduction to that so that you'll know a little bit more about trigonometry when you get there to that class. All right, we need to know a few basic definitions before we can understand kind of what even this is talking about. So the first thing, let's talk about a reference angle. Reference angle is basically the angle being used in the problem. This can change based on the problem. So maybe the problem that you're dealing with is talking about B, angle B. So if you look here at this one, it's talking about this angle right here, okay? Because it's talking about angle B. Or maybe the problem that you're working on is talking about angle A. And so it's going to use this one down here. Pretty much every problem that you'll have in this book is going to have a diagram. It's going to have a drawing of a triangle that you're working with. So what they do is they kind of show you which one is the reference angle, and they put this little, it's like a little curve on it to tell you, okay, we're dealing with this angle B. Now I want you to see something about these angles. Let's look at the angles. So the angle, there's angle C, there's angle A, and there's angle B. Notice that those are capital letters, okay? So your angles are going to use capitals, okay? Notice here we have the sides A, B, and C, and those are all in lowercase. So the sides are all going to be, I'll put small letters. So angles are in capital letters, sides are in small letters. Let's look at another thing kind of about this that you need to be able to recognize. The capital letter B for the angle, and then across the triangle, so across from the angle, is where you will find the small letter B. Same thing is true. Capital letter C, look across, and you're going to find small letter C. Capital letter A, you look across, and you will find small letter A. That's how triangles in trigonometry are labeled. Capital letters for the angles. C is almost always going to be your right angle. Sometimes it's not labeled like that, but typically C is going to be your right angle. Across from C is going to be little c, and little c is always going to be your hypotenuse. Okay, now, like I've said in past lessons, the A and the B don't matter. If I could switch those, and it wouldn't be a big deal, I cannot switch the C. C has to stay there. Now, if I did switch this, so if I switched A and B, and I can do that, I can make this one A and I can make this one B. I also have to switch the small letters. I have to switch these sides because the sides are always opposite. So this one is going to become the B side, and this one is going to become the A side. Okay? So just pay attention. Make sure that you see kind of what's going on there with those letters, because it is going to be important that you get the letters in the right place and that you can identify which angle that we're talking about. So now with kind of the way I've switched it around, now our reference angle is A, because A is the one with the little curve thing on it that says, okay, we are talking about angle A. All right, let's continue down here. Let's look at a couple more words. The word opposite, very important in trigonometry. Opposite means the side across from the reference angle. So if our reference angle is A, the opposite is going to be small letter a. Okay. If our reference angle, so let me go ahead and change the reference angle and say, okay, the reference angle is B. Well, it's going to be the side across. So now B is the opposite. Opposite means literally it's on the opposite side of the triangle. The next word here is adjacent. Adjacent is the side touching the reference angle. So if my reference angle is A, then the side touching it is B. Now, you might be thinking, but Mr. Steve, C also touches the angle A. So again, this is kind of the angle right there. There's the vertex. So B is touching it and C is touching it. I understand that. But C is the hypotenuse. Notice this note that I made right here. Note, the right angle, C, is never the reference angle. So we're never talking about C as a reference angle. C is always the right angle. Okay? It also says, and the hypotenuse is never the opposite or the adjacent. So if C is never the reference, then little c is never the opposite or the adjacent. C is always the hypotenuse. Capital letter C is always the right angle. So that never changes. The only things that can change are the A and the B, and the opposite and the adjacent. So let's go through this one more time. Let's switch this down here. Now B is the reference angle. What is the opposite for B? The opposite is going to be little b, and the adjacent is going to be A in that case. All right, so make sure that you remember which one's the opposite, which one's the adjacent. Very important as you're trying to locate different things in the right triangle. All right, another thing that we need to talk about is trig functions. Trig functions. What is a function? Well, you haven't really gotten there yet in algebra. In algebra class, we'll talk about what is a function. But for right now, I just need you to know that these are what's called trig functions. And a trig function is basically like a formula that we're going to use in trigonometry. There are three different formulas that we use in trig. They are sine. Some of you have wondered, some of you have seen this on the calculator, right? You've seen this button that says SIN, and you've been afraid to hit that button because you think that it's sin to hit the button. No, that's not what it means, okay? Some of you think math is sin, okay? Math is not sinful, okay? So the button sin is actually the button sine, S-I-N-E. Sine is short for sine with an E, basically. So on your calculator, you're going to see a button that says sine. And this is on like a scientific calculator. This is not like on a little basic calculator. This is on something more, a little bit more fancy, right? Scientific type calculator. All right, cosine is the second trig function that we'll talk about, and that is abbreviated COS. And usually it's right next to the sine button on the calculator. You'll see the cosine button, COS. The third one and the last one is called the tangent, and that's labeled TAN on your calculator. So sine, cosine, and tangent. This is three of the different functions. There are actually more functions, but these are the three most common. These are the three that we're going to start with. Once you get into Algebra 2 and trigonometry, things like that, you'll learn even more functions. But these are the three that we're going to learn right now. So with sine, here's the simple formula for sine. Remember I said these are like formulas. The sine formula is going to be opposite over hypotenuse. opposite over hypotenuse. For cosine, it's going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. And for tangent, it's going to be the opposite over the adjacent. Okay? Now, what does that mean? Right now you're like, huh? What? All right. What we're going to do is we're going to come back, we're going to reference each one of these. We're going to keep coming back to it. But first of all, let me show you kind of a cool way to remember this. All right? SOHCAHTOA. SOHCAHTOA. And here's what that means. The S is for sine, and then opposite hypotenuse. So, and then CA is C for cosine, A for adjacent, H for hypotenuse. SOHCA, and then TOA, T for tangent, O for opposite, A for adjacent. SOHCAHTOA. Maybe that helps you, maybe it doesn't. I don't even know what SOHCAHTOA means. I guess that's what you do when you hurt your toe. You SOHCAHTOA. I don't know. Maybe it sounds like an Indian word to you, or maybe I don't know what it sounds like to me, but it's just a way to remember it. So if you can remember SOHCAHTOA, then you can remember the trigonometric functions there. Okay? Now, how do these work? So what we have here is we have a triangle, right? It's a right triangle. Here's our right angle down here. Here's our C angle right here. Here's our A. Here's our B. Okay? Now, remember, C is never the reference, and they usually put like a little arc there for you to know which one is your reference angle. This one doesn't have one, so I'm just going to put one in here. We'll use the reference angle of A. In your book, you can follow along on page 534. That's where you'll find this 534, 535. Okay, so example 11.6a. So we want to find the sine of the reference angle A. That's what we're trying to do. And let me write that, sine of A. I may change this. We might do cosine of B or something like that. But for right now, we'll do the sine of A. That's where we're going to start. So let's go back up here and let's look at, okay, what is the sine? Okay, here it is. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So you're going to come back over here. We're referencing A. So let me kind of write this so that you can know it's the opposite over the hypotenuse. I'll just write O over H. So that's what we're looking for, the opposite. What's the opposite to the reference angle? Opposite to the reference angle is this side right here, 24. So we're going to put 24 over, what's our hypotenuse? Well, our hypotenuse is opposite the right angle, so our hypotenuse is 25. So the sine of angle A is 24 over 25. Sometimes you might have to reduce that. This one can't be reduced. You can't reduce 24 over 25. That's your answer right there. Now, sometimes, depending on kind of what level of trig that you're on, sometimes they're going to want you to write that in a decimal number. And in decimals, we always write it with 3 decimal points. You'll always see trig functions written with 3 decimal points. So in this book, you don't have to do that. That's just kind of something to put in the back of your mind for future Algebra 1, Algebra 2, trigonometry. You'll always have to write those with 3 decimal points. All right, so the next one, let's do the cosine of A. So let's do cosine of A. And if you remember right from cosine, it is adjacent over, that looks like a 9. There we go. Adjacent over hypotenuse. So what is our adjacent? Our adjacent, it's adjacent to A, remember, right? So adjacent means the one touching it. The one touching it is 7 over, what's the hypotenuse again? 25. 7 over 25. Again, you would check to see, do I need to reduce it? If the answer is yes, then reduce it. This one can't be reduced. There's your answer. The last one is tangent. And so we want the tangent of A. And so the tangent is, if we go back up here to where it was, remember this one is TOA. So this is opposite over adjacent. So we'll go opposite over adjacent. And so what's the opposite? Remember, A is still our reference angle. We haven't changed that yet. So the opposite is 24. And the adjacent is going to be 7. 24 over 7. Check that for being able to reduce it. You can't reduce it, and so that would be your answer. Now, let's redo those, except for this time we're going to find the angle, the sine of B, the cosine of B, and the tangent of B. So we keep the same formula here, but we're going to have to get rid of all that because that was for A. So I'll redo this one down here. So we'll put this little arc down here with B now. So what is opposite of B? 7. So the hypotenuse stays the same, and it's 25. Notice last time when we did A as our reference, it was 24 over 25. This time the opposite is 7, so it's going to be 7 over 25. Cosine of B, and so again, we're using B as our reference now. Cosine is the adjacent, 24 over the hypotenuse, 25. Then we would do the tangent of B by doing the opposite, which is 7 over the adjacent, which is 24. All right. So, basically on those, it's kind of easy once you remember, because there's no math involved there. All you have to do is come back and remember this little formula. And then once you remember which one's the opposite, which one's the adjacent, then you should just be able to plug numbers in there and be able to figure those out. Okay? That's really all I have for you in this lesson. I hope you learned something. I hope you understand that. If not, make sure that you try these, practice these, come back, watch the video again, try to figure out what you missed, and that way you can do well on your quizzes and tests that you have coming up. Okay? That's all I got for you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.